Superman 36, legacy number 879, Joshua Williamson writing with Dan Mora on the art. So, this is the first post-KO issue, and as we kind of knew, Superboy Prime is taking the reins of this book as the main character for at least an arc. In fact, he even tells us that himself in the book, because it's meta, because that's what Superboy Prime is, and he even says, hey, for the next few months, let's hang out and do some adventures and whatnot. So, depending on how you feel about the meta stuff, might obviously have a big impact on how much you feel about this arc. I will say that as I was reading it, it was doing an okay job of like being well paced, of setting up some running jokes. The idea that like lots of people think Superboy Prime's a hunk, so there's like a bunch of female heroes like ogling him when he's weightlifting on the watchtower. Then all of his neighbors in his new apartment building are all ogling at him, kind of thing.
I forgot he has the like seared in S brand on his chest. So when all the ladies were talking about it, they're like, oh, is that a tattoo? It's like, oh no, it was a brand. He did it to himself. And I was just like, oh God, I forgot about that. It makes me hate him even more.
It's funny though, because like, so there's like a meta page at the start where he just kind of like looks at the reader and says, hey, this blah blah blah, and like, you know, event just happened, and he basically makes some jokes about how, oh yeah, I know, we're all event fatigued, cash grab, blah blah blah, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I am pretty fatigued. Thanks for noticing, Prime. But
yeah, thanks for reminding me.
What was getting me about the meta stuff though is that later on it felt like he was actually looking at. They did a thing where he goes to a comic book shop, right? He gets a job at a comic book shop, and he's looking at the comics that actually exist. And okay, it's one thing to say that he's from our world and he's read the comic books. It's another thing to seemingly put those books inside the universe itself. I thought like, I get why they wanted the meta joke of like actually having the cover of this issue inside the book itself, but it doesn't actually make that much sense if you stop and think about it for like 2 seconds. But whatever.
Not at all. Yeah.
Regardless, the whole thing here is that Lois is like, oh, I need to do something with Superboy Prime. Like, he can't just live in the Watchtower. He has to maybe get a job. He has to maybe, you know, do stuff. And she keeps saying things like, you know, like, what would Superman do? And he's like, damn it, Superman would get a job. He would be nice to everyone. I guess I'm going to have to try and do that. And that's basically the gist of what this issue is just kind of helping him settle in. And, you know, he's a bit of a big shot. There is a big fight, of course, at one point. We get as he himself puts it, a deep cut from the 90s. Ignition shows up in Metropolis and he fights him for a bit. That's the thing. So, I mean, how did you feel about this issue, Matt?
It was annoying. I liked all the action, but Prime, and I try to go in with an open mind. I try to be like, okay. And then when we get the fourth wall breaking, which I don't mind in the right circumstances, but he's edging dangerously close to being DC's Deadpool. And I don't mean that complimentary. Right? Because we already have Harley. Harley can do that kind of weird stuff. You know? And so to have this super fanboy in Prime and making all these referential type things, it was very irritating. And again, I've described Superboy Prime as the type of comic fans I stay away from. You know? And of course he ends up at a comic book store to work there. And I was like, oh yeah, he would be somebody that I would like go the opposite direction when I go to pick up my books. You know? And yeah, like, again, it's fine. Dan Mora's art looks great. Like, I love, there's a page where Superboy Prime is ruminating about what would Clark do. And it has all these different covers from over time. And I feel like Mora does a very good job of hitting those different styles.
It does the Honey Badger thing of putting Superboy Prime in all the covers. Yes.
And like, there are all these different ones, right? And you have him on like Justice League. It says Justice League Unlimited, but it's Justice League International cover with all those ones. There's an old Adventure Comics where Superman's saving a cat from a tree. There's that famous Jim Lee one for Tomorrow of Superman on the, you know, the edge of a building looking out and stuff. And so like, yeah, so like all of that is cool. That's a great use of the whole meta narrative, but just like, you know, Lois is like, what do you mean by your own number one? So I feel like maybe the fatigue with Prime is the point, because if like Lois is already being like, what is this kid talking about? Like, what's he going on about? maybe we'll eventually get there and it won't be his sole identity by the time this arc wraps. And like, cool. Start at that and let him build to be an actual character and not just this meta engine that's referencing things all the time. Because that's annoying. But as for the rest of the issue, I thought the fight scene with Ignition was cool, especially when he starts going a little bit too far, and then we get like the guidelines that Mora draws on poking through, and then like Superboy Prime turns to a sketch, and then he pulls himself out of it right before he does anything bad. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And again, if that's what we're building to, is that we're going to build almost like, I don't want to say just redemption, but like we're going to build to Superboy Prime being an actual type of character that's not just this annoying Deadpool type break the fourth wall, then cool.
I mean, I'm not holding out hope for that. I would say that I think it's well paced, and it's kind of thing where I wasn't necessarily that mad at like this idea of like, okay, you have to actually like live here now, you have to get a job, you have to like figure out how you're going to like actually function as a regular part of this world. I like some of those elements. I don't really like him referencing the meta stuff to other characters though. I think like saying, I hope you get a new number one soon, and she's like, what do you mean a new number one? Like, I don't like it for two reasons. One, I don't like them being that on the nose with it. I'd rather he just make meta references to us, but not the other characters. And two, there's a conversation earlier in the issue where Lois talks to Mr. Terrific, and they both openly talk about the fact that he's from a world where we're all fictional characters in comic books. So she knows that detail, so the number one comment shouldn't have been that confusing to her, right? Even if she doesn't really know much about comic books, I think she understands that they're numbered, right? Everyone's heard of issue 1 of whatever series going for millions of dollars. We've all heard that, even if you don't read comic books.
Well, and that's why I took that as she's getting annoyed by it. And she's like exasperated, going like, what do you mean new number one? Like, why do we keep doing this?
I think you're being generous by reading it that way.
Maybe. But yeah, and the fact that like, I do like that Terrific's like, and that can make him dangerous because none of us are real, right? Like we're all fictional characters.
Well, it's that, and also the fact that he knows like intimate details about all our lives because he's read, all these parts of our stories and things and so on.
True, but up to a point, right? Because they've been rebooted numerous times and things have changed. So we have to think that he's not operating off of brand new, right?
I mean, yeah, but I don't think we can cement them with that though, because they will bend that to however way, like whatever writers writing Superboy Prime will just decide, is he up to date in terms of like comic knowledge or not? And if they want to play with this idea that he only knows everything up until whatever reboot they want to say is a cutoff, then, but as far as until they tell me otherwise, I'm going to assume he knows everything because I just feel like that's what they're going to do.
True, and this is the inherent problem with Superboy Prime as a character.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing though. My major problem here, some of the meta stuff's a little bit too much, and like it's a bit constant, which I think is a bit of a problem. But for me, the bigger problem here is just that I know that this pacing, which I think is actually pretty good in this first issue, is going to go down the toilet because it always goes down the toilet with Williamson after an issue or two. Like, I guarantee you by the third or fourth issue of the Superboy Prime stuff, I'm going to feel like the story is just moving through things too quick. This was well paced, and it set up the problem of him being around. We have the solutions. We have Lois effectively being the supporting character that he can call for help, but he's going to try and go it alone. And we set all these things up, and it's like, this is perfectly finely paced. But I see that going down the toilet in a couple of issues' time. And then at the end, of course, there's like a phantom version of Manchester Black that shows up, who also is breaking the fourth wall because he looks at the panel, the camera, if you will, and says, "What are you looking at?" And I'm like, Manchester Black's not usually meta, right?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Now that I can think of, the last time I read him, Morrison wrote him, because that was for the Authority, and he wasn't meta. So,
and if anyone was going to do meta with a character, it's going to be Morrison.
Because Morrison understands that line, though, in a way that Williamson just doesn't. So, but yeah, I did like Manchester Black showing up because I do feel like that's the perfect kind of foil for Superboy Prime, in a way, because Manchester Black is that kind of everything sucks, like this nihilism to him, and I feel like you can put him up against Superboy Prime, who his whole reason for end up being an antagonist was that the heroes in the DCU weren't being good enough, and that frustrated him to punch reality and create these retcons and everything to eventually the point where he was just going to rebuild everything to have his perfect version. And so you have these two kind of opposing viewpoints. I feel like that can work, but then also Williamson's writing, so I don't necessarily think that's where that's going to go.
Yeah, I can't say I'm that excited by Manchester Black showing up. Like, I don't dislike him necessarily. I think he's fine.
Well, no, he's
like in his stories that he was originally in. I think he's perfectly fine. But I'm not excited when he shows up again. Like, I'm like, nah, he had his story.
Yeah, he feels like bargain basement Constantine at times. That's not just because they're both British, but they have the same kind of attitude where, you know, oh, this stupid world, and no one knows how it really works, but I know how it really works. And yeah, that's kind of we've done that a million times. So, but yeah, it was just kind of annoying, but it wasn't. I didn't hate reading it. I was just perpetually annoyed. Yeah, it was a weird feeling.
It was very readable. And that's kind of, I think, what I keep meaning by saying it's well paced and it flows well. It was a very easy enough to read book, but certainly by the end with the Manchester Black cliffhanger, I was just kind of like, I can already kind of sense how I'm going to feel about this in 2 issues time. Like we've done enough Williamson arcs now at this point of different books, but even just specifically a Superman, right? You know, we're 30 plus issues into this run. I had to laugh at one point, actually, because at one point there was an editor's note that said, like, you didn't read the tie-in issues that just happened. And I'm like, I didn't, son of a bitch. I didn't.
But I did, because I'm a mark.
You are. You smelly mark.
Yep. That said, Dan Mora, this is a pretty good use of Dan Mora, I feel. So, the art always looked good. The fight sequence with Ignition, I thought was a lot of fun. Showed the strengths of Superboy Prime, like actual, like, him being able to tear down buildings and whatnot, and now he has to keep that under control. So, yeah.
Yeah, all right. We giving Superman?
Straight 7.
I don't know. I kind of want to agree with that, but I also feel like it's maybe been a bit too generous. So I'm going with 6.5.
There you go.
Just to be different more than anything else, to be honest.